Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Trevor had heard people say that love cools off over time, that marriage goes through phases, ups and downs. He believed that. He chalked up Brenda's long silences to exhaustion. He justified her frequent trips to the gym as her way of dealing with stress. The growing distance between them, he thought, was normal, they'd been together for so long. But certain things started bothering him. The way she hid her phone whenever he walked into the room. The late-night messages she claimed were from her girlfriend's group chat. The sudden rush to shower as soon as she got home. All of it together created an uncomfortable feeling growing inside him like mold in a forgotten corner. One day, when he went to grab the laptop to prepare a quote for a new client, he noticed Brenda had left her email account open. It was a simple message, but with words no husband should ever read. Today was even better than yesterday. Your scent is still on my skin. The signature was just the initial C. His heart raced. But instead of confronting her, he decided to close the laptop, take a deep breath, and think clearly. He knew that from that moment on, everything he did had to be precise. No impulses. No scenes. He needed proof, certainty, and a plan worthy of the pain beginning to form inside him. That same week, he called Ronald Blake. The two had known each other since high school, but they'd taken different paths. While Trevor specialized in building pools and became one of the most respected contractors in the area, Ronald joined the police force and, after retiring, started working as a private investigator. Without beating around the bush, Trevor explained the situation. Ronald listened in silence and, at the end, simply said, "Give me 3 weeks." During that time, Trevor kept up his routine. He went to work early, came home at the same time every day, maintained his composure. If Brenda noticed anything strange, she didn't show it. She kept going to the gym 4 times a week, always at the same time. She claimed she needed time for herself, that CrossFit was good for her self-esteem. Trevor listened with apparent understanding, but inside, every word she spoke felt like another knife sinking deeper. By the end of the second week, Ronald reached out. He said he needed to show Trevor some things in person. Trevor stopped by his house after work. As soon as he walked in, Ronald plugged a flash drive into the TV and began playing a series of images. Brenda and a man leaving the gym together. The two getting into his car. Kisses exchanged in the garage of an apartment building. Footage shot from a distance, with date and time stamps. With each new image, Trevor felt like the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. But what caught his attention most was when Ronald paused a video and said, "That's Chad Walker. CrossFit instructor. Well known around town, has several clients, and a pattern." That's when the story took a turn. Ronald explained that as soon as he started following Chad, he noticed Chad was seeing other women. Married women. The scenes repeated themselves: gym, exchanged glances, private conversations, outings at odd hours. In less than 10 days, the investigator had already identified at least 4 different women Chad was involved with. All of them married. 2 of them even had kids at the same school as Chad's, which meant he knew their families and still did what he did. Trevor sat silently for a few minutes. The anger was there, yes, but what dominated him in that moment was a different kind of coldness, almost clinical. He saw a pattern. This wasn't just an affair. It was predatory behavior. A repeated structure. A dirty game involving not only his wife but other families, other men. And he knew that if this pain was eating away at him, other husbands were probably living through the same silent hell, unaware of who their wives were sleeping with every night. With Trevor's permission, Ronald went further. He accessed fake accounts Chad had created to communicate with these women. He discovered Chad used encrypted messages, nicknames, and even secondary apps to hide his conversations. There were records of meetings scheduled at hotels in the neighboring town, reservations made under third-party names, and even the rental of a small loft used exclusively for secret encounters. Chad was methodical, careful, and knew how to cover his tracks. But no one counted on Ronald. Trevor began storing all the evidence in an encrypted folder on his own computer. He had everything: dates, names, times, videos, screenshots. In one image, he saw Brenda's wedding ring hanging from a chain inside Chad's car. It was as if she deliberately removed the symbol of marriage and displayed it while with her lover. That hit Trevor like an arrow. Still, he remained silent. Inside him, an idea was forming. Still shapeless, but already with direction. He didn't want to make a scene, expose his pain to neighbors, or beg for explanations from someone who'd already made their choices. He wanted something bigger. Something with weight. Something that wouldn't just reveal the truth, but leave a mark. Not out of simple revenge, but for justice. Trevor felt he wasn't the only one deceived, and if there was a way to turn this game around, he'd find it. That night, when he got home, Brenda was watching a show and casually asked if he wanted to order food. Trevor replied he wasn't hungry. She smiled and turned back to the screen. He went upstairs to his room and began organizing the files in chronological order. With each click, his anger turned into strategy. That's what made him different. He wasn't going to explode. He was going to act. And when he did, it would be final. Trevor spent the next few days focused on work. He met with clients, supervised construction sites, delivered quotes. On the outside, everything was the same. On the inside, an organized storm. The images, messages, videos, everything was recorded, cataloged, and backed up. Each identified woman was logged with name, meeting dates, conversations, and family context. He carefully observed Chad's behavioral patterns, and what had started as an isolated case with Brenda now revealed a much larger, and dangerous, network of affairs. Chad wasn't just unfaithful. He was methodical. He slipped into the cracks of weakened relationships, became a confidant, then a lover. And he did it serially. With Ronald's help, Trevor gained access to lists of CrossFit students. The number of women involved might be larger than it seemed. Ronald started checking social media profiles and fake accounts linked to Chad. In one of them, he found conversations with a woman identified as V, who talked about discreet encounters and said she was in a lukewarm marriage. The messages were nearly identical to those Brenda had received. Same format, same phrases, same manipulation. Chad was using a script. Trevor realized this was no longer about personal hurt. It was about something bigger. He was dealing with someone who seduced committed women like an addiction. A kind of emotional predator disguised as an inspiring personal trainer. He knew exactly how to trigger feelings of emotional lack in women and used it to his advantage. The most impressive part was how he managed to maintain all these relationships without raising obvious suspicions, until now. Brenda continued with her usual routine. She talked about workouts, mentioned Chad in a neutral tone, as if he were just the class instructor. She said he was demanding, that he pushed hard on squats, and that he said things that got into your head. Trevor listened silently. Each of her sentences was another piece of the puzzle. Every comment helped map the level of involvement. But he showed nothing. He responded with short expressions, changed the subject, or got up to make coffee. Brenda seemed calm, with no idea Trevor already had proof of everything. As the volume of evidence grew, Trevor decided to cross-reference names. He took the women appearing in the images and compared them with their husbands. He discovered two of them had previously worked with him on other projects. One was Dennis Campbell, an architect. The other was Mark Driscoll, owner of a construction supply store. Both had wives who attended the same CrossFit class. Trevor was certain they were on Chad's list. But he still needed confirmation. One Saturday afternoon, while passing by a garden store, he ran into Dennis by chance. They talked about an old project, and naturally, Trevor brought up the gym. Dennis said his wife had gotten really into the workouts, seemed like a different woman, more vain, more energetic, and had even distanced herself from him a bit. Trevor paused for a moment, then simply said, "I need to show you something. But it has to be between us." They arranged to meet at Dennis's house that night, without his wife. When Dennis saw the images, he froze. He confirmed it was her. Identified the car, the shirt, the bracelet. Read the messages. Closed the laptop and sat with his hand over his face for minutes. Trevor didn't say he'd also been cheated on. He preferred to listen. Dennis admitted he'd noticed changes but never imagined this. Trevor then said the phrase he'd repeated to himself hundreds of times, "The pain is the same. What changes is what we do with it." Carefully, Dennis mentioned other names. One of them was Kevin Myers, whose marriage also seemed shaken since his wife started CrossFit. Trevor reached out to Kevin the following week. They met for coffee at a discreet spot. When Trevor showed him the folder with the files, Kevin stared intently and murmured, "That explains everything." In less than 10 days, Trevor had assembled a silent network of betrayed husbands, all with similar stories, all devastated, all unsure how to act. But Trevor knew. He'd already chosen the stage, the moment, and the impact. Each of them would have their names protected. None would be exposed. Only Chad. Just him. Trevor would do this strategically, without premature scandals or empty threats. The plan was underway, and everyone was on board. Meanwhile, Brenda kept acting as if nothing was happening. She made plans for a couple's trip at year's end, asked if he wanted to trade in the car, mentioned her mother wanted to visit. Trevor agreed to everything. He was patient. Time was on his side. He knew that at the right moment, the truth would explode in front of everyone. And no one would see it coming. It was like a complex construction project, invisible foundation, hidden structure, flawless finish, until the day of the unveiling. And Trevor had already chosen the date. 3 weeks remained. The regional CrossFit championship had been anticipated for months. The event gathered the region's top athletes and attracted hundreds of people, including sponsors, sports enthusiasts, and community members. Chad was the main name in the competition. He appeared on posters, banners, promotional videos. Organizers called him the podium favorite. His popularity had grown so much that supplement brands and gyms were already scouting him for bigger contracts. Brenda talked about the event excitedly, saying everyone from the gym would be there, that it would be Chad's big day. Trevor listened, nodded, and said he might show up if he could leave the job site early. Inside, he was counting the hours. Trevor had finalized the last technical tests the day before. With Jared's help, the person in charge of the championship's audiovisual broadcast, everything was ready. The videos were organized in sequence, audio synced, text overlays applied. There was a single command to run everything in sync with the competition's timer. Jared received payment up front and a guarantee, no one would know he was involved. Trevor emphasized the content was true, involved moral crimes, broken trust, and a network of affairs with the potential to destroy families. Jared reviewed the files before agreeing. He slowly closed the laptop, crossed his arms, and said, "This guy needs to fall." On the day of the event, the gym was packed. Rows filled with families, young athletes, businesspeople, and curious onlookers. Local media provided live coverage. Trevor arrived an hour before Chad's presentation. Wearing a plain t-shirt and cap, he went unnoticed among the crowd. Some of the husbands he'd spoken to in previous weeks were there. No one interacted. Each stood at a strategic point in the bleachers. It was a silent pact. Brenda was also at the event, seated next to one of the friends involved with Chad, completely unaware of anything. When Chad's name was announced over the loudspeaker, the crowd applauded. He emerged in the center of the gym, full of himself, waving to sponsors, blowing kisses to the cameras. The lights adjusted, the entrance music played loudly. The large screen behind the platform began showing highlights of his career, medals, training photos, motivational quotes. Chad raised his arms, pointed to the sky, and prepared for the first challenge of the finals. It was at that exact moment that the screen went black. For 2 seconds, everything was dark. The audience thought it was part of the intro. Then the first image appeared. Chad kissing Brenda at a parking lot entrance. The date displayed in the corner of the screen. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gym. Next, a video. Them laughing together at a restaurant, hands clasped on the table. The image paused, and text appeared on screen: extramarital affair with Brenda Williams, married 15 years. Then another photo. Chad with a different woman, in a park. Caption: Melissa Campbell, wife of Dennis Campbell. The crowd began reacting. Murmurs, whispers, people pointing. The following images came like a series of punches. Each revealed another woman, another marriage, another lie. The husbands recognized their wives in the photos. Faces weren't blurred. Trevor had been direct. The images showed faces, touches, intimate glances. No doubt remained. Chad was still standing in the center of the arena, frozen, eyes wide, breathing heavily. He tried signaling to the organizers, but the screen operators had relinquished control for security reasons. Jared had followed the plan to the letter, scheduled the video to play automatically at the exact moment, with remote playback backup. No one could stop it. With each new image, tension rose. Brenda shrank in her seat. The friend beside her covered her mouth with her hands. Both were in the videos. Both were exposed. The gym became a minefield of shame, disbelief, and anger. One of the husbands shouted Chad's name and jumped over the safety barrier. Another followed. Security tried to intervene, but the crowd had already begun invading the arena area. Spectators stood en masse, trying to film, understand, comment. Shouts mixed with sounds of shock and outrage. Chad tried running backstage but was surrounded. One man grabbed him by the shirt, another shoved him. The blow knocked the trainer to the ground. The first punches followed. Fists, kicks, screams. Security acted too late. They tried pulling the men away, containing the chaos, but the damage was done. Chad lay curled in a fetal position, trying to protect himself, screaming it was all lies. Trevor remained standing among the crowd, watching from a distance. He didn't touch anyone. Didn't say a word. Just watched. For him, it was already over. Police arrived minutes later, dispersing the commotion. Chad was handcuffed, more for his protection than for arrest, and escorted out amid boos. Organizers abruptly canceled the event. Sponsor brands publicly withdrew their support within hours. The news spread at an astonishing speed. The broadcast video, featuring the screen images, was shared across social media and reached thousands of views in just hours. Headlines read, CrossFit idol exposed live at event. Trainer exposed for multiple affairs, sparks chaos at championship. The photos circulated alongside leaked audio recordings Ronald had obtained in recent days. Chad became a subject of ridicule, outrage, and disgust. His career ended in that instant. Brenda left the gym under escort. She cried, trying to hide her face. When she got home that night, Trevor was already waiting for her. Silently. Her moment had come. In the middle of the gym, still reeling from the scandal, the crowd slowly dispersed. Some people still tried to make sense of what had happened. Others, shocked, simply left in silence. Brenda remained seated, motionless. Eyes watery, face in shock. Smudged makeup revealed more than tears. It was the weight of everything. The screen now displayed a technical issue message, but it was too late. The images were already on social media, on phones, in conversations. And in her conscience. Brenda looked around, searching for Trevor. She saw him standing on the other side of the gym, between two pillars. He stared at her for a few seconds, but not with fury. It was something much worse. An empty look. No affection, no longing, no resentment. A definitive end. She stood up as if trying to reach some chance to explain herself, but he turned his face and exited through one of the side doors, disappearing from her view. That hurt more than any exposure. He didn't yell. Didn't argue. Just turned his back. And the absence of reaction was a clean cut to her chest. She arrived home half an hour later. Saw his truck in the garage. Trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. When she walked in, Trevor was sitting at the kitchen table. Her suitcase was already there, leaning against the wall. A paper folder with basic documents sat on the table, ID, cards, essential belongings. Brenda collapsed. Fell to her knees, crying. Begged him to listen. Said it all started as a silly impulse. That her friends talked so much about Chad, his looks, his attention, that she thought it was harmless. Said all of them were getting involved with him, that it was like a silent game among them. And she, just joined in. Never thought it would go this far. Never imagined she'd be discovered like this. Trevor remained silent for a few moments. Then stood up, picked up the folder with documents, and placed it in the suitcase. Looked at her and calmly said, "I forgive you, Brenda. Because I need to be at peace with myself. But you're no longer my wife. Gather your things. And leave my house." She cried harder, pleading for another chance. Said it was just a phase, a mistake. That he'd always been the love of her life. Trevor didn't respond. Just opened the door and pointed the way. She understood. Rose slowly, picked up the suitcase, and left. Each step was a farewell with no return. She went to her mother's house, who lived in a modest neighborhood far from downtown. Arrived late at night, still in shock. Her mother opened the door and was startled to see her daughter in that state. Upon learning what had happened, she sat on the couch and remained silent for a few minutes. Then looked Brenda in the eyes and said, "You lost a good man. You destroyed your own home out of vanity. You were raised with values. And you chose to lose yourself." Brenda cried like a child. Her mother didn't hug her. Said she could stay for a while, but it would be temporary. That she'd have to face the consequences. And that this needed to be a final point for the woman she'd become. Time passed. Lawyers handled the process. Trevor didn't make anything difficult. Signed the papers quickly. When the divorce was officially finalized, he stored the copy in his office drawer and returned to work as he always did. For him, that chapter was closed. And it wouldn't be rewritten. The following months were filled with silence. The scandal story still circulated in town groups, but the hurricane gave way to collective emptiness. Many pretended they'd forgotten. Others used the story as a warning. The big screen video was taken down from several platforms, but copies still existed. Trevor continued his life at a steady pace. He resumed his construction routine, expanded his company's services, and gained new clients precisely because of the integrity he demonstrated. People admired how he handled everything. No violence. No shouting. No degradation. He simply exposed the truth. The respect he earned was silent, but lasting. After the divorce, he hired a lawyer to handle the sale of the house he'd shared with Brenda. Bought another, smaller one, in a discreet condo. Renovated everything with his own hands. There, he found new peace. The pain had been great, but his dignity was greater. Gradually, he began talking to Sophie, his widowed neighbor. She'd observed him for years but always kept her distance out of respect for his marriage. Now, their meetings happened naturally. Coffee on the porch, conversations about simple things. Sophie didn't heal him, but she helped him remember there was still room for trust. Brenda continued living with her mother for 3 months. Tried looking for a job but was constantly recognized by people. Received anonymous messages, indirect social media comments, invitations to recovery groups created by other women who'd also been involved with Chad. Her mother, firm, demanded she move out once she landed a job as a sales clerk in a clothing store. Said she'd done enough by providing shelter and food, and now it was up to Brenda. Brenda rented a small studio downtown and began living minimally. Carried the shame in her gaze. Some days, she thought about sending Trevor a letter. Other days, she preferred pretending he never existed. But the memory was there. And it hurt more when she remembered his silence. Chad disappeared from town for a while. After the scandal, he lost all contracts with supplement brands, gyms, and training partners. Was sued by 2 husbands for moral damages. One of them filed a criminal complaint, alleging emotional harassment of his wife. The gym he frequented terminated his affiliation. Tried opening his own business in another city, but the story followed him like a shadow. Changed his social media name, tried reinventing himself as a personal growth coach, but the comments always came back. He was called a manipulator, home wrecker, opportunist. No post escaped judgment. Chad learned the cost of ego. And discovered that fame built on lies collapses with a single click. Dennis Campbell and the other husbands rebuilt their lives with effort. Some saved their marriages through therapy and forgiveness. Others took different paths. But all of them, without exception, thanked Trevor at some point. Because he was the first to see the pattern, to piece it together, to say the fault wasn't theirs. They weren't weak. They were deceived. And by seeing the truth laid bare for everyone, they could finally understand that sometimes, the silence of a wounded man carries more strength than any scream. Trevor never sought revenge. He sought justice. And by exposing the truth, he not only freed himself but prevented other families from suffering the same destruction. He rebuilt his life calmly. Without rushing to start a new romance, but open to the possibility of being sincerely loved. Sophie respected him. Admired how he looked people in the eye. And that was enough. Time passed. And with it, came healing. Because some falls aren't meant to hurt. They're meant to teach us where we should never step again. Comment below where you're watching this story from. Your opinion is what helps this channel grow. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.